Paragraph 7 deals with assignability. This is an incredibly important provision. This deals if a buyer wants to assign this contract to another person or entity prior to the closing and have that person or entity be the ultimate buyer. There's 3 choices: that the buyer can assign freely, or the buyer can assign and not be released of liability, or simply the buyer cannot assign it. A seller typically likes to know who they're going to be selling to. So they kind of like that last provision that the buyer cannot assign. But this can be a great tool in the case that if the buyer does not know how they want to own the property, in other words, if they have a trust or they want to set up a trust or an entity, or if only one spouse is here or available, then we could have one spouse sign and bind the contract, and then they can assign the contract to the spouse when that spouse becomes available at a later time, but the contract is going all along. We use this a lot if the buyer is going to set up a trust or an entity. An entity is a corporation or an LLC that they set up that they want to own the property in. And that way they can set up the entity after they sign the contract, not before. One big consideration from the seller standpoint is that the seller is holding financing, that the seller wants to know who is going to be the borrower. And if they have it in there that the contract can be assigned, then they can sign it to an empty entity, and that the seller does not like that. So that we would put a provision that that the buyer must guarantee the loan should the buyer assign the contract.